Okay, we are live, and thank you for waiting, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Just figuring out a few technical issues with the audio, but we have Richard Bronson on the line here, and we'll get to him in a second. So again, I'm Chris Russell. Welcome to another edition of RecTech Live, rectechlive.com here on the Crowdcast platform. Glad you're here today. And just a quick show note. Next week, I'll be talking by myself, essentially, for employers and vendors about what RecTech Media does. So going to kind of cover all the brands and tools that we have. Many of them are free, of course, for you to recruit better, find more talent, find more clients as well. And so I'll do a solo show next week around all that, the chat box there. So today we're going to talk to Richard Bronson. He's got an interesting story, interesting website for you to recruit on. And we'll bring him on today and talk about 70 million jobs and how hiring the formerly incarcerated is good for business. Richard's always also going to speak at SHRM this year, so look for him there if you're going to be at the SHRM National. I think it's in Las Vegas. Is that right, Richard?
Yes, it is. June 23rd through the 26th.
Awesome. That should be a great show for you. So, Richard, let's start by just giving the audience a quick overview of who you are and what 70 Million Jobs is first.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris, for having me. And again, our apologies for the technical delays here. 70 Million Jobs is the first national for-profit employment platform for people with criminal records. There are about 70 million Americans who have some kind of criminal record in this country, and each and every one of them experiences a great deal of pain in finding a job. At the same time, ironically, corporate America is also finding a challenge. And Chris, tell me if I should be changing slides here, because that goes.
Let me focus the screen. 1 second.
I could do it on my end. Presenter's view.
Yep.
Okay. There we go. Nope.
There you go. Yep.
Is that good? Okay, cool. So at the same time that you have folks with criminal records experiencing lots of difficulties in getting a job, and actually their unemployment rate nationally is about 30%.
30%, okay.
30%, which has never, ever been higher for any other population in this country, even including the Great Depression. But ironically, the rest of the country is experiencing historically low unemployment. And what that's done is it's created, as everybody on this webinar knows, it's created an acute challenge for employers to find people, particularly at the low scale. The jobs are not attractive. The competition across the street is offering a nickel more. And on top of that, if you are able to recruit talent, it's even harder to retain it. There's a huge cost to companies when they have jobs that are unfilled. Forgetting about the disruption that goes along with hiring someone, going to the expense and time to do that, to have a manager train the individual, and then a month later for the person to decide that they can get a nickel more across the street, or they don't like this, they want something else, and they leave. The disruption to the system is very expensive and very upsetting and very depressing for everybody. So what we've done is we've created essentially a two-sided marketplace where we are matching up people who have criminal records, who are desperate for jobs, and matching them with companies who often are very, very, very eager to fill positions. Now, the natural thing that anybody would ask at this point, in my experience, is, okay, that makes sense in theory, but do we really want to hire people with criminal records?
Right.
It's a fair question. And particularly, do we want to hire people with criminal records who are potentially have committed very, very, very awful crimes? What are the implications to that? What are the liabilities? What is the potential PR fallout if, God forbid, something should go wrong? If someone shows up and acts inappropriately to your clients, your customers, if someone shows up worse with a gun or someone steals, and how will the rest of the workforce feel about working with folks like that? These are all very important, valid questions. But on the other side, as people who are in HR and have had experience in hiring this population, the reality is very, very different than these fears. And that underlying these fears is a great deal of bias that exists, and that's not really borne out in reality. Because the reality is that folks with records often end up being the very best hires a manager or an HR professional makes. And then the reality is that almost never do these folks, once they have a job, do they act inappropriately and create a problem. This is not just me talking now. I'm going to share with you some statistics that have just been released by SHRM in a recent study that they completed.
Okay.
And I'll show you the actual study in a second. But it turns out, okay, I'll show you here, 82% of managers in corporate America who've had the experience of hiring people with records, 82% of them and 67% of HR professionals agree that when it comes time to hire people with records, the quality of hire is at least as good, if not better. The quality of hire is at least as good, if not better.
Why is that, Richard? Explain that for us, if you could.
I'll tell you why. And it's initially you'd think it's perhaps counterintuitive, but when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. People who have records, people who have been going on interviews, people who have had doors slammed in their face, and that is what happens to them, when they do finally get a job, and particularly if it's a reasonably good one, where there's some potential for the future, they are people who are loath. They are not about to jeopardize the good thing they have because they know full well that there might not be another opportunity to follow it. These days, particularly among young people, there's this sense of that life has infinite possibility, and as a result, it's very hard for these folks to really make a commitment. Loyalty is an old-fashioned concept that is not widely held anymore by America's workforce. Folks don't have this concept of starting at a company when you're young and retiring with the gold watch. That's the old ideal. And it almost seems antique to us now, but that's the thinking that used to exist. The people I work with, who are, I might as well give you kind of a profile of who they are or what they are. 85% of them are male because that's reflective of the greater prison population. Mm-hmm. Many of them are men of color, African American, Latin American, and they're 25 to 35 years old. Some of them have completed high school or more, but figure as a baseline, they have a high school education, not a great deal of job experience. That's by and large who we work with. These folks know that if they get a job and it's reasonably good, they're not about to misbehave on the job. They're going to work very, very hard, and other studies have shown that they stick around longer. So you end up with heightened performance and extended retention, which is the home run in the HR world. Yeah. Now, not only is their work, again, in SHRM's words, as good, if not better, than people without records, but their coworkers really end up rising to their level because they're very proud, typically, that their employer has a heart and would consider and ultimately hire these folks. Now, that doesn't happen immediately. There's certainly a period of adjustment, could be a couple of weeks, when a company brings in someone or a number of people who have records. And it could be, particularly acute if the nature of the crimes these folks have committed are a little more frightening to the workforce. But what we have seen almost across the board is that after a couple of days, when people actually kind of drop their guard and they recognize that the people who they're working with are human beings, and if they hear their story, if they hear the explanation of why their life ended up the way it did, not only are they accepting, but they often use words that I'm inspired by them because their lives were so challenging when they were young. They made a stupid mistake when they were young. And it's not American not to believe in second chances.
Yeah.
Who among us hasn't asked for, forgiveness? Who among us is so saintly that they haven't screwed up that in another time or place, it could have ended up a lot worse than it did? It's no accident that people of color who don't necessarily have access to the lawyers and the parents who have influence in the community and all that kind of thing, who end up in jail because they can't make bail and they rot away there sometimes for a year or more. They haven't even been convicted of a crime. None of this is fair, and Americans just don't feel like that's fair. And then when they hear the story, they end up very, very often feeling a great deal of empathy for their coworker, and they're proud of their company for dealing with them as a human being. And that's a really good thing. So in any event, that is the reality.
Yeah, I have a story about that, Richard, from in my early 20s. I actually knew somebody who, I think I was working at the YMCA in Connecticut, where I lived. And there was a guy there, his name was Anthony Broadnax, we called him Q. He had some trouble with, I think, drugs. He got arrested for some kind of drug charge somewhere. And he had trouble finding a job. And then my girlfriend at the time actually worked for kind of a corporation in the area. And I remember him, she referred him to them, and he went to apply. He got the job. They knew about his record, and they wanted to give him a second chance. And from what I remember, he was a great employee for them. He did really well. He, like you said, he didn't want to lose that job. So he performed, he showed up on time every day. He did his job, and they loved him after that. And so I think it's a simple example of why you should hire these people, right?
Yep. And we hear this anecdotally time and again.
Yeah. Now, tell us, before we get to more of the site, Richard, tell me more about your story, because you have a very interesting story itself. I want to hear about your background, which I think people will recognize as well. So go ahead and tell that story, and then how you get into actual creating 70 million jobs, if you could.
Got it. Yeah, I'm used to telling my story. I'm from New York, and years ago, it feels like another lifetime ago, I worked on Wall Street. And that may say enough right there for people. But I worked on Wall Street, and I did very, very well. I made a lot of money. And at a certain point, I actually became a partner at the infamous Wolf of Wall Street firm. And I will tell you right now that, yes, things were that crazy as depicted in the movie. Okay. Scorsese has a certain flair for making bad things look glamorous. It was a bad thing what we were doing, but it was pretty wild every day coming to work. In any event, I left that company to launch my own company in Florida, which I grew into a very large business. I had 500 employees around the country and made even more money there. Unfortunately, some of what I was doing was illegal. And Chris, I wish I can tell you that I was innocent, or that it was the other guy, or any other excuse, but I have no excuse at all. My excuse was I was greedy and stupid and impatient. And I told myself everybody else was doing it, but and everyone else was doing it, but that doesn't make it right at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you that in any event, as a result of that, I was rightfully punished. I received a prison sentence of 2 years in prison. I paid everybody back prior to going away to prison, and I gave away every dollar that I had to charity because I just felt so disgusted with myself and what money had done to me. I came out of prison destitute and homeless.
What year was that?
Was 2005.
2005, okay.
And I went, and which is not uncommon for people who go through the criminal justice system. Between what you pay in fines and restitution and lawyers and all these other things, most people who are coming out of prison really have nothing. As bad as it was for me coming out like that, I couldn't help but reflect, well, I'm a white male in white corporate America. I have a college education. What about the guys I lived with? Young men of color who maybe completed high school. What were their opportunities? Well, they had very, very little job experience. What were they going to do?
Yeah.
They certainly weren't trained to do anything while they were in prison. What was going to become of them? It took me a long time to figure things out. Ultimately, I got lucky and I discovered a nonprofit organization called Defy Ventures that worked in the reentry space. And it was very rewarding work. I eventually became director. But ultimately, I came to believe that the old-fashioned way of addressing reentry through nonprofits that were very local really were not having nearly as much impact as I thought could be had. Mm-hmm. And I felt like a for-profit approach was exactly what was needed so that my organization could scale nationally. I also felt that it needed to employ technology so that that would help it scale as well.
Right.
So I launched the company about 1.5 years ago in New York. And almost immediately, the city of Los Angeles, the mayor's office there, asked me to partner with the city to help them with their unemployment problem. I went through then a famous accelerator program in Silicon Valley called Y Combinator.
Yeah, that's pretty famous. What was that like for you?
It is. Well, it was a great experience. I believe I was the oldest person ever to go through it. So it was filled with, these 23-year-olds who had multiple PhDs from MIT and Harvard and Stanford.
Yep.
And me with the criminal record, the old man. I was kind of like the bumbling, uncle who you don't want to hand the TV remote control to because he's going to screw up the cable connection or something.
Richard, what did that teach you? What did the Y Combinator experience teach you about running a business?
Well, I had run a lot of businesses. I am really bereft of technology expertise. And so I learned a little bit about that. I also learned about fundraising, working with VC firms and how that's all about, because it's pretty Byzantine. It's kind of non-transparent. It's opaque to figure it all out. So I was kind of given the keys to learn how to do that. And I was successful in raising venture capital money. And I decided to stick around in the Bay Area to build a company. So last year was our first year, and it was not even a full year, but we were successful in facilitating the employment of more than 1,000 deserving men and women, which I believe is more people with records that got jobs from an organization in that period of time than's ever been done before.
Very nice.
We built a community of people with criminal records that we're working with. Right now it numbers at 11 million. So that's a lot of folks we're working with. And we work with some of the largest employers in the country, companies like Uber and let's see, Denny's and Dole and DoorDash and Mr. Car Wash and Berkshire Hathaway and ShopRite and lots of others. And these are companies who, A, believe that it's the right thing to do. They believe that they have a corporate responsibility, and they understand the benefit of bringing people into their workforce from a diversity and inclusion point of view. And more companies are coming to us with that as a mandate. And we're able to address that certainly with the population we work with. But more than that, they work with us because at a business need, which is the best reason to do it and the most sustainable reason.
Right.
Companies have come to understand that they can no longer afford to ignore large pools of talent, whoever or wherever they may be, because it's so competitive, the recruiting that they do, particularly at the lower end of the wage scale. And I believe that as it relates to people with criminal records, this is a population that's having its moment. I think back upon the 50s and how people thought of women, and they were derided economically and politically, and nobody paid attention to them because they weren't worthy of paying attention. And then, of course, the women's movement changed that. And now we look back and we go, how stupid were we to think that?
Right.
And it's not just women, it's African Americans through the civil rights movement. Recently, LGBTQ. Attitudes change quickly in this country right now. And I see that happening in my own life and as I look around as it relates to people with records. Because since 1 in 3 people do have a record, it's no longer that the people in prison are these animals who I would never know and I have nothing in common with. The people in prison are us. They're our families, they're our friends, or at worst, a friend of a friend. Almost everybody's been kind of, touched by this directly or indirectly. And as such, we've had to really readdress our attitudes toward this population. Most people in prison are not there because they committed some heinous crime. So many of them are there because of a drug charge. I live in California. Some of those drugs are legalized now. Yep. And yet people are walking around with felonies on their record. They're not getting jobs because they committed a crime that I don't know a single person who went to college who didn't smoke pot once in a while. And yet these people got caught. And their life was never, ever the same again. So we think there's loads of good people out there. And we think that people are coming to understand it. Even Trump just signed a law, the First Step Act, which really only affects federal system, but still, it really goes to show, the rapidly moving change in attitudes towards this population. And incidentally, I was in prison with Jared Kushner's dad, Charlie.
Oh, really?
So that was my connection to the Kushners. In any event, so companies have this real openness that we have discovered. I didn't know initially if HR departments would want to hear from us, much less pay us to promote their jobs.
So what are they telling you now?
First of all, we target the largest companies in the country. Now, we work with all size companies, but when we make outreach, we're talking to companies who have at least a few thousand employees, because obviously they have lots of jobs to fill. We'll work with any company, and we'll find great candidates for companies who are only looking to hire one person. But when we reach out to these large companies, we specifically target the top one or two HR people in the HR department. And we find that they are all eager to talk to us. As an HR professional, this is very much front of mind, fair chance hiring. Nobody else is calling them with this value proposition. We alone have the national footprint and the technology and the applicants to really address their needs at scale nationwide. And they are very interested. I would say nearly every HR professional I talk to is in favor of hiring these folks, even if their company isn't quite there yet.
Right.
But many companies are there. We had more business than we could handle last year. A good problem to have.
Gotcha. All right. Feel free to continue with your slides here.
Sure. So in any event, I want to show you, this is our website. It's 70millionjobs.com. And it looks a lot like any other job board, certainly. And when we work with a client, we post their jobs. We're able to scrape their jobs from their career page, integrating with their back end. We're capable of doing. And it looks very, very similar to other job boards that an HR professional would look at. I want to stress the fact, however, my people don't go to other job boards because they've never heard of them. My people have never heard of Indeed, and they certainly have never heard of LinkedIn. And because they don't own laptops generally, and they don't have access to desktop computers, they only have their phone. I don't think 1% would have any idea how to upload their resume from their phone. I don't think 1% of people in general know how to do it, but they certainly don't. So we have ways that we figured out to work around that to make the whole process a lot more friction-free than elsewhere. But in any event, we have all the analytics that you might want to be looking for. Our pricing is very, very aggressive, and we've gotten a lot of attention. So many magazines have written about us. I would dare say that if a company isn't looking into this, looking into hiring people with records, at this point, they're behind the curve because it is so much now in the forefront of the professionals that I speak to.
Gotcha.
Our clients say very, very nice things about us. I'm very happy to say. We get better and better every day as we have more and more applicants coming to us. Yep. Now, go ahead, Chris.
How do you get applicants onto the site itself? I mean, talk more about your onboarding process as far as getting the.
Let me show you this.
Connecting them.
Because our users have so little familiarity with pursuing traditional jobs. Indeed, for many of them, this might be their first time ever doing it. And as such, they have no knowledge of what to do. And typically, they don't have the social context. Their parents didn't do it. Their friends aren't doing it. And they're trying to figure out things on their own. We discovered that if we merely place an ad on our job board, like they do at Indeed, say, and rely upon traffic to discover it, and rely upon the ambition and the eagerness of the applicants to do what's required. If we do that, we're going to be waiting for a long time. Rather, we have discovered that we have to market aggressively the jobs to them rather than them coming to us. So when we begin working with a client, we will post their job and they'll get some engagement from that. But by far and away, our secret sauce is the action we get from our outbound marketing of the job. We start with 4 targeted emails that are filtered based upon geography. So in other words, we're targeting people who live right by where the job is. If that doesn't work, we then go to 3 targeted text messages with a strong call to action to get the individual to click on the link on the text, which takes them to our site where there's a link directly into the ATS of our client. We don't require them to set up a whole involved account, because if we do, we're going to lose a lot of people, and our primary goal is getting our clients' applications. If the texts don't work, we then go to telephone calls, and we make thousands and thousands and thousands of calls, and we talk to the applicants. And it's almost kind of like a hybrid recruiting, hybrid kind of approach, whereby we're able to sell the company and share what makes them special, where the opportunity lies. You know, this is a chance for you to take your family to the doctor because they have medical benefits. They promote from within. They have a heart. They're willing to give you a second chance. And what ends up happening is they get very enthusiastic about that opportunity. And we hear this from our clients all the time, that our applicants show up, and they're not there begrudgingly. They really are excited about working at this place,
right?
Which, needless to say, has a terrific ripple effect. Now, we also do a lot of social media, and we have a network of 400 local nonprofits and community organizations, and we get the word out to them as well. So the end result is we get a lot of people who are highly engaged, who HR departments are not currently seeing through their current recruiting channels.
Okay.
And we have the ability, as I've mentioned, to seamlessly integrate with their back end. So we can scrape their job page on a daily basis and stay up to date with what they're doing. And I spoke about some clients before. Here's a bunch more. The last thing I want to talk about, which I haven't addressed at all, we as a company are after double bottom line returns. By that I mean we want to build a big, successful company. And frankly, I used to be rich. I'm poor now, but I'd like to be rich again if I have the choice. But we're also looking to do massive social good. And certainly my background and other people on my team also went through the criminal justice system, and the rest of us all feel this great passion because we have come to know these folks and really develop this incredible affection for them. These are heroic people. They have been in prison. They've had terrible, terrible lives, and yet they approach the day with such an enthusiasm and a belief and a conviction that they can build a new life for themselves and their family. And if you only meet these people, you'll be transformed when you discover that. So when you hire these folks, I spoke about the impact on your workforce, the positiveness. There's also tax credits, federal tax credits that are available. But at the same time, the company is sending a message to the towns and cities in which it does business that it takes itself seriously as a corporate citizen, that it believes it needs to stand with the population and not just the luckiest among them, but the ones who really could use a hand. And they're setting an example to their competitors and to other companies that doing good could also mean that you're doing good business because you're addressing critical problems that are costing you millions of dollars, and you're solving this while at the same time doing the right thing. I don't know about anyone who's listening or you, Chris. I've been very, very sad the last 2 years because I'm proud to be an American, and I don't see our values really being represented out of Washington. But I do believe It's a basic American belief and tenet and something that defines who we are, that we do believe in second chances, that we're all human beings who make mistakes. And for people who are sincerely interested in taking ownership of the past and moving forward productively, that these are people who are worthy of our compassion and of our job offers. So in any event, that's why we say, let's get started. We have the people, we have them throughout the country, we have them on demand at scale. They want to come to work for you. Lastly, I'd just like to leave with you, as you mentioned, Chris, I will be a speaker at the SHRM National Convention in June, as it shows on the screen here. But before that, SHRM also has a talent conference in Nashville in April. I'll be there as well. If you would like to set up a time for us to meet, I have a lot of people who are scheduling appointments. If just to say hello, I'd love to meet you. And I guess that's about it, Chris. I really thank you for this opportunity. I know this means a lot to you on a personal level as well. And thank you for those sentiments too.
Well, you're welcome, Richard, and thanks for the talk today. I think you're doing good for society as a whole. So I wish you nothing but the best of luck. Let's get some of these folks hired, and it's just going to help all of us in the long run. So again,
Amen.
Richard Bronson from 70 Million Jobs. What's behind the name, by the way? Explain the name before we.
There are 70 million Americans who have a criminal record.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. I've actually had people ask, well, if you're very successful and if you got 10 million people jobs, what would happen to your name? I said, well, if I had that problem to deal with, I would probably buy the URL 60 million jobs. But that would be a good problem to have. In any event, thanks again for your time. Everybody have a wonderful day.
Okay, Rich, appreciate it. And that's it for today, guys. We'll stay tuned for the replay. And again, I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.
Okay. Thank you for that help.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.